I'm taking over as Boston Bruins GM for the day, and my first move is acquiring Trevor Zegras from the Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Thursday, May 15th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode, I'm pretending I'm taking over for a day as Boston Bruins GM, and the move that I'm making is acquiring Trevor Zegras from the Anaheim Ducks, a dynamic playmaking center that the Boston Bruins desperately need and can fit into their core for years to come. I'll discuss why Zegras, the potential cost, and some potential pushback and how to deal with that as well. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. That's X, Blue Sky, Instagram, even TikTok. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I have been covering this team for various outlets and the NHL, hockey at large, for about 20 years now. My first blog post, everydayers may recall, was on the Joe Thornton trade, sending him to the San Jose Sharks back in 2005, and it prompted me to get on my keyboard and lament that move. But today, we're talking about a beneficial move for the Boston Bruins, and that would be acquiring Trevor Zegras from the Anaheim Ducks. Look, we all know this team desperately needs a game-breaking forward who can create on his own, especially at the center position. The Bruins have solid defense. They have potentially elite goaltending. They have a core, as we discussed yesterday, in Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, that while we may be a bit lower on a couple of those guys than we were back at the beginning of the season, still are guys to build around. And what they're missing is that game-breaking forward, center specifically. Trevor Zegras is still only 23 years old, and while he had a down year and he's 24, just turned 24 on March 20th. While he's had a couple down years, he still is a guy who has shown elite playmaking ability early on here in his career. For those of you who may not be super familiar with Zegras, he is a left-hand center. He was drafted 9th overall by the Anaheim Ducks in 2019 and already has two 60-point seasons on his resume. In 2021-22, 23 goals, 38 assists for 61 points, 23 goals, 42 assists for 65 points in 2022-23. He's played only 88 games over the past two seasons due to injury, and his production did fall off as a result, but he did finish this past season strong, and there's every reason to believe that he can rebound and become that guy for the Boston Bruins. He's one of the most creative zone entry and power play forwards in the league. That's something the Bruins really need. Despite that injury-plagued past couple of seasons, some tension with Anaheim's coaching staff, the skill is undeniable. And there are rumors out there that he could be made available. Who knows if they'll try to fit him under new head coach Joel Quenneville. But he's got 1 year left on a contract that's paying him $5.75 million. Then he'll be an RFA, and the Bruins would therefore have control over his next contract. Now, this move wouldn't be about panic or flash. It's about balance. You keep a strong foundation on the back end with McAvoy, Swayman, Hampus Lindholm, a demonstration that the Bruins have had successful trades with the Ducks in the past, a couple times, really. Zegras' skill is undeniable, and you have the ability to add a dynamic offensive threat who can carry the puck, run a power play. Again, last season, I've talked about how David Pastrnak led the NHL in scoring at 5-on-5, but this team suffered in large part due to a very ineffective power play. If you add a guy like Zegras who can kind of reinvent that part of their game, how much better could Pastrnak be? How many more goals? How many more points could he rack up? And how much better could the team be as a whole as they look to have a quick turnaround and get back into the Stanley Cup playoffs next season? You're not necessarily replacing anyone either. You still have Elias Lindholm there. You have Casey Middlestat at center, who's very affordable for the time being as well. So you have the opportunity to build out a modern top six with guys like David Pastrnak, Morgan Geekie. We'll see who rounds out the second line, but perhaps Zegras, Zacha, or he puts Zegras on the wing, have him play with Middlestat. Who knows? But you can do that all without sacrificing the upcoming 7th overall pick, and by perhaps parting ways with some younger guys who are expendable if you're adding a guy like Trevor Zegras. We'll talk about how the Bruins might be able to accomplish this, but the reality is right now they desperately need a guy like Trevor Zegras. We're talking about the upcoming draft and how they can acquire a pretty high-end center there, but it's not necessarily going to be NHL ready. And if you could add Zegras now to a group that includes David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm, Casey Middlestat, who's got 2 years left at a cap hit of $5.75 million. Morgan Geekie is going to get a raise. Pavel Zacha. That's a decent group of guys to build around up front. And it's not going to necessarily cost you in terms of cap space. It could cost you some prospects and some guys that you might want to, or you're planning to build around, but maybe aren't quite that guy. Right? To have Zegras play alongside David Pastrnak, that could be one of the most dynamic top lines in the NHL. Geekie, Zegras, Pastrnak. Look at what Pastrnak and Geekie were able to accomplish with Zacha. Yes, Lindholm looked good up on that line to end the season. So maybe you have Zegras playing second line and anchoring an effective second line along with Pavel Zacha or Casey Middlestat or whoever else you want to put up there with him. Maybe you can still sign a Mitch Marner or still sign a Nikolai Ehlers in free agency. This is the kind of move that the Bruins need to not only entertain, but actively pursue. And it's something that I would do on my first day as GM if I was given, of course, the sign-off from team president Cam Neely, who has a lot of say in these moves. We'll talk about potential pushback later on. Coming up as the podcast continues, we'll discuss what this kind of move might cost and if it's worth pursuing at that cost. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with the same-game parlay? And you can hit $200 in bonus bets and add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Again, just head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA, and you can get in on the action every single night as well with regards to the Stanley Cup playoffs and Major League Baseball. Thanks so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please subscribe if you have not already. Today we're discussing adding Trevor Zegras, solving a big problem for the Bruins, which is the lack of a game-breaking, high-end offensive center. He would bring undeniable skill, reinvigorate the power play, carry the puck into the zone, make things happen. The Bruins do have a bunch of draft picks that they have accumulated as a result of some trades made prior to the deadline. They also have some prospects that they could possibly move, as well as some cap space to add. Now, they do have to take care of some free agents, Morgan Geekie, Mason Lohrei, more prominent among them, perhaps John Beecher, Marat Husnudinov, Jacob Lauko as well. But they will have some cap space in order to do something creative. And at $5.75 million, Zegras would not break the bank, and you would be on the hook for his next contract next year when the cap is supposed to go up even more. And I think they might be able to do this without sacrificing the 7th overall pick or perhaps even Mason Lohrei, because the Anaheim Ducks are pretty loaded on the back end. They might be looking more to add depth up front in the way of some young prospects. So one of my packages would be Fabian Lysell, Georgi Merkulov, a 2026 first-round pick, which would be top 10 protected, because we don't want to be giving up a pick if we're in the similar situation. And don't forget, the Bruins have 2 first-round picks next season, their own, as well as that of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So if they trade their own, top 10 protected, then they still have the ability to draft in the first round next year because of that Leafs pick. To make things even more tantalizing, you could also flip a second-round pick this year because they have 2 of those. Their own, as well as one that came via trade. So they have 2 second-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year. You could try to flip Fabian Lysell, who, let's be honest, still has some upside, but hasn't quite found his groove with the Bruins. He might benefit from playing like a Frank Vatrano did by moving on, and look how he's thrived in Anaheim. If you don't want to give up 2 picks instead of Merkulov, who, he's an AHL standout, seemingly NHL ready, but the Bruins haven't given him that chance. And there's a real possibility that he could just say, peace out, I'm going back overseas to play, unless the Bruins choose to move him. So if he is a tantalizing option for the Ducks, and you do have to sacrifice a couple picks alongside that, that's fine. If you want to try to hold on to the first round pick and just float the second, you could perhaps add Matt Poitras to the list. So you have Lysell, Poitras, and a 2025 second round pick. The reason you might want to do that is because you are adding Trevor Zegras to the mix. So you already have that center depth in terms of Lindholm, Zegras, and Casey Middlestat. Poitras is a strong 2-way forward. Still perhaps needs to add some size and I don't want to say smarts, but like NHL maturity to his game. And he could be a guy that is given up in order to minimize the draft capital that you have to give up. So maybe you do Lysel Patra and that 2025 second round pick. Because let's be honest, Zegras' value isn't super high right now. You could easily write Lysel off and part with him in a way that doesn't hurt too much. If they would take Merkulov and the 2 picks, picks are nice, but it's just potential, right? You don't know exactly what you're going to get. You never know how long it's going to take for that player to pan out. And dealing Patra as well, you're likely going to be drafting a center here with the 7th overall pick. You drafted a center last year in Dean Letourneau, so that's suddenly a position of depth where you could deal from. So either you give up Lysel, Merkulov, 2 skilled forward prospects, one with raw upside in Lysel, one who's closer to NHL ready in Merkulov, plus 2 strong picks, and the Bruins keep Patra, they keep Lohrei, they keep that 7th overall pick this year. Or you do Lysel, Patra, and one of the picks. This version would hurt more because Patra is already proven to be able to contribute at the NHL level and has strong, like David Krejci vibes. But in return, the Bruins are getting a forward with much higher offensive ceiling and more offensive polish right now. Both deals, in the end, make you better right now and set up a long-term forward group with real top-line potential. You're getting a Zegras who's, remember, only 24 years old and who could grow with your core of Pastrnak, McAvoy, Swayman. He's a bit younger than all of these guys, but that's the point. You're not adding a guy who's even further down, like an Lysel, Merkulov, who are younger and maybe not going to be core players for the Bruins. And you add a guy who can jump right in and be a valuable member of this team. The core isn't that old. Pasternak's 28, Middlestat 26, Lindholm's 30, Zaka 28, Geeky 26, and then you have Mark Kastelik, who's 26. If you re-sign Beecher, Husnudinov, Lauko, they're 24, 22, 25. So Zegras would come right in and fit in with this core right away in terms of age and the window to succeed. Whereas Merkulov, there's questions about whether he's legit NHLer. Patra, 21, still has room to grow. Merkulov's already 24, by the way, same age as Zegras. Lysel is 22, still a lot of upside, but you have to give to get. And there's no question that banking on Zegras, despite the fact that he's had some injury issues and some down seasons, that's a safer bet than Merkulov or Lysel or whoever you're picking because, again, that's just potential, and you don't know what the timeline is going to be. And by the time, say, a 2026 pick hits, Pastrnak could be like 31 or 32 by that point. So you want to bring in the guy who is more NHL ready and able to contribute right away. Now, I can see some pushback happening. Maybe there are some questions about Zegras. There's questions about the package that you have to give him up. We're going to discuss potential pushback and why I still think it's the right move here as the podcast continues. All right, so we've talked about Trevor Zegras, why he would be a tantalizing ad for the Boston Bruins. We've talked about the potential package that it would cost to acquire him. If you look at Dauber Hockey, which I always do, you look at his upside trend chart. Yes, it's a bit down, but he still has 80-point upside as a member of the Anaheim Ducks, a team that is still rebuilding and might want to bring in guys who perhaps are more suited to Joel Quenneville's system than the kind of offensive evolution that the Bruins are reportedly, or not reportedly, they've said that they are committed to. Whether or not that's true, it remains to be seen, but it's still something that they are looking to do, which is reinvent themselves offensively. And who better than a guy who was drafted just 6 years ago, 24 years old, and who has had seasons in the past that, I mean, are very good. 67-point pace one year, 66-point pace another year. He can contribute on the power play and is the kind of guy that they need. Now, pushback. A lot of people will say, well, maybe Zegras doesn't fit the Bruins system or culture. And that's kind of the point. They already have defense. They already have grit. They already have defensively responsible centers in a Lindholm. Perhaps Poitras, if they can still hold on to him. What they don't have is a playmaker who can draw defenders and feed Pasta or other wingers that they might be able to bring in. Zegras gives you a different look and a better chance to score in tight playoff games. Casey Middlestat perhaps has that upside, but he hasn't really shown it much over the past few years. Middlestat kind of has a similar profile to Zegras. He was drafted 8th overall in 2017. He has a season in which he posted 59 points for the Sabres, 15 goals, 44 assists, only 40 points this season between the Colorado Avalanche and the Bruins. He only had 10 points last season for Colorado in only 18 games. But he did have 9 points in 11 playoff games in 2024 for the Avs. So Middlestat, Zegras, those are guys that have high or higher offensive upside than anybody you have in the system at the moment and would fit the bill. Now, maybe you just flip those two guys, but I still would rather have both of them, especially this season when their cap hits combined to like what or even less than what a Leon Draisaitl is gonna cost, right? And it's not just for 1 year that they would be acquiring for. You might ask, well, is 1 year worth top prospects? Is it worth giving up Lysell, Merkulov? I would say, yeah, very much so. Poitras, probably still, yes. Because it's not 1 year that you're acquiring. He's a restricted free agent. You have negotiating power, cap space this season to add him, and then more in the future to fit him in because the cap is going to be going up. And if he fits, you lock him up. If not, you can flip him and still recoup some value. More pushback. You're giving up too much youth. Well, that's the trade-off when you want to get back on track sooner than later. You're not selling out the whole future. You're still keeping the 7th overall pick this year. You still have, say you give up a second and a first this year and next, you're still keeping a second and a first this year and next because of trades that you've made elsewhere. You still have young pieces coming to build around this season. So it's not a retool, it's not a tear down, it is a retool. You can't go too much heavy on youth because Pastrnak, McAvoy, Swayman are not getting any younger. So the closer you can bring in guys to their windows, the better. Poitras is kind of right there. He could easily be on the team next season. Lysell, question marks. He was scratched in the AHL playoffs, don't forget. Merkulov, he was injured in the AHL playoffs, but he was Providence's leading scorer again this season and could be a guy who would benefit from a change of scenery if he wants to continue his career at the NHL level. So I would definitely give up Lysell, Merkulov, and a couple picks for Trevor Zegras, even if it costs a first-round pick. Protected, of course, top 10 protected, but don't forget they will be likely getting a pick in a couple years, another first in the Brad Marchand trade. Right now they have 1 first this year, 2 firsts next year, a first in 2027, and then projected to have 2 in 2028 if the Panthers do indeed beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. So you have some things to work with. Sweeney's never been shy to pull the trigger on trades, especially with the Anaheim Ducks. They've pulled a couple off over the years. Zegras is the kind of guy that has the high offensive upside that you need. He's affordable this season, and he has control on his contract for future seasons. So this isn't a rental. This isn't a desperation move to win this season, and then you're stuck without prospects and picks to work with moving forward and risk losing him as an unrestricted free agent. He's a restricted free agent, and it's worth giving up some guys that you may have questions about down on the farm for someone who is much more proven and who is right there in terms of the window. The Bruins, again, they're built on defensive structure. They have the elite goaltending. What they don't have is a dynamic playmaking center who can drive offense and elevate elite scorers. And Zegras, at 24-year-old, brings that elite puck movement, zone entries, power play creativity, proven 60-point-plus producer despite tough usage in Anaheim, RFA status after this year, giving him team control. And he's not coming in necessarily as a savior, but a foundational offensive piece to complement your current core and bridge into the future with players like the upcoming 7th overall pick, Dean Letourneau coming up, and hopefully Matt Poitras if they don't have to give him up. Ideally, it's Merkulov or maybe Brett Harrison if they want to look into him, a big-bodied two-way center prospect. Ideally, they would hang on to Poitras, but if that's what it costs, that's what it costs. I think I would still do it despite that. Let me know what you think. Hit me up on the YouTube comments, on X, on Instagram. Would you pursue Trevor Zegras, and at what cost? What are you not willing to give up? And who are you willing to part ways with in order to add someone who can come in and hit right away as a member of the Boston Bruins? Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, my friends. Thank you for making Locked On Bruins your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out all the action from last night on NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find Locked On NHL Game Night on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please do have a great Thursday. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.